So let's talk about some of the challenges that will present themselves in a home. We just handled a deck not too far from where we live, and we were only, when you go out and you look at the project, you see rotted wood. So obviously what you see is what we're going to pull up. We had slated to pull up about 6 cedar decking boards, and by the time we pulled the second one out, every other board was rotted from the underside because the deck had a couple challenges. And let me explain to you what was the problem. And this is usually decks that are built probably within 12 to 18 inches off the ground. They don't have proper ventilation. B, there was an issue with a lot of trees. So around the base or the skirting of the deck, they never really got the leaves brushed away so the air could kind of flow through there. So about 10 years ago, they put in new vents. They put in 2 vents, actually. They didn't have it before. So venting it and making sure that there's air getting underneath if your deck is built close to the ground, okay? That's number 1. Make sure good ventilation. 2, keep any decaying material like leaves, bark, trees away from the base of that deck. There again being low. Trimming back your trees, huge deal. I want to tell you about a house in 2 of them actually, one in St. Charles and one in Burr Ridge, and they both had an elderberry tree. I think it was an elderberry tree. That's what it looks like to me. And the berries would drop on the deck, and the ants would come up and eat these berries or whatever it was, and they would basically be on the deck all the time, and they were nesting up there, and literally we were replacing deck boards every 2 to 3 years. We were going out there because the ants were nesting inside the wood, and once they find a soft spot to nest, then they keep coming. So there was a food source for them. And once the trees got chopped back and the elderberries weren't falling on the deck, it's amazing on how much less material we had to repair. So trim back those trees. Don't let a lot of stuff fall on here. You also have to remember, trees give off sap, and when that sap lands on your deck, you can't see it, but if you get down on the ground and you look across, and you'll see kind of like almost looks like sprinkle of water, but it's dry. That's sap. That's one of the worst things for your deck because it grabs all the dirt and your deck gets incredibly dirty. And if you're not cleaning that, your deck is really not, after it's been preserved, it's not going to do its job it really needs to. So you got to get that sap off of there. So these are some of the real problems that I see out in the real world. That every day the people, what's wrong with my deck? Why is it doing this? Keeping it clean, okay, and keeping things away from your deck that can really degrade the natural material with other natural materials, keeping that away will probably add a good 5 to 10 years to your deck because of the fact that you won't have materials really promoting the growth of funguses, molds, mildews, attracting animals, attracting insects. So these are things that are probably nature-made, we'll call them. I would say man-made biggest problem would probably be downspouts. And we just ran into this situation on a project we just finished up. And what had happened was the downspout came off and ran to the side of the deck and didn't go any further than to the middle part of the deck, or if the deck was probably 12 feet wide, it came out to about 10 feet. So the water would pool up there. Told the homeowner, hey, you wanna not have to do this as often. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. If you're not wanting to have to replace these cedar deck boards, we need to get that water away and realistically just put on an additional, either flex tubes or just go out and buy another piece of downspout and attach it and get it away from the house. They had a nice grade, it graded away from the deck and everything, but they didn't get past where it started to grade down. So, whoa, almost knocked that over. I would highly recommend take a look at your downspouts, where they're located, where we've got, and seriously, the more you can get water away from your deck, the better you'll be served, especially kind of when you're close to the ground. Cedar and womanized, water can be rough. Let's see what else we got here. That looks like about it. One other small little tip. It gets back to potted plants. I know a lot of folks like to put their decks or put their plants on their decks. I would highly recommend making sure you're keeping them elevated off the deck floor. Okay, you would be surprised when that pot is sitting on there and the water's going right down. It just stays wet all the time. And if you find a piece of wood that is wet all the time, you're going to find an ant that's going to find its way in there. It's going to nest and it's going to start to rot. And it's amazing how little it can take for that to happen. So potted plants, come up with some solutions. Put a mat, put some sort of plastic matting underneath it, but don't let that water get up underneath it. If you have to, possibly put in some planters along the handrails so you're not sitting on the floor. Because usually what I find when we're dealing with rot issues, it's on horizontal, not vertical surfaces. So it's always flooring. In this deck we just completed, it was the flooring and it was the bench seat, because she had put her potted plants up on the bench seat, and literally the structure and everything around it was just completely rotted. And nobody could know it until you pulled the one board, and it was like paper. It just fell apart. It didn't take anything to really take it apart. So those are hopefully some good tips for you folks out there that have decks. I probably focused more on cedar and pressure treated, because that's really the highest maintenance. So there again, cedar, womanized every 2, maybe 3 years at most. Ipe, if you want that beautiful look, once every year. And on the composite decking, I would say just keep it clean like you keep your kitchen floor clean. So thank you again. I appreciate you barely time to cook. What do you think about outdoor carpet on top of your wood? In some respects, it really depends on how close the deck is built to the ground. If you're an elevated deck, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. If you find that you have a lot of water sitting on that, I would have a challenge with that, especially with cedar. Maybe not as much on the womanized, and I wouldn't concern yourself with the composite or the Ipe. In Ipe, usually you never cover up because it's so doggone beautiful. So I think we're going to end on that question. Doesn't look like anybody else has any other questions. Thank you again for joining us so much. If I can be of assistance to you, please reach out to us. And thanks again. I'm Mark at Discover Your Home. Have a great evening.